You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and today we have begun our dive into the defensive side of the football, going through each and every single division, ranking the teams within their own divisions from 4 to 1. For those of you that have maybe been following along or maybe are fans of teams in the AFC North, you'll notice I obviously skipped the AFC North offenses. I have not done them yet. Don't worry. The reason for that is mainly because I want to see what happens with whether or not Aaron Rodgers signs. It honestly seems like he's going to, and he's just playing his long game like he likes to do. But I want to make sure that that is confirmed because it's a pretty consequential piece to what that offense will look like in 2025, and I don't want to be putting that out there and then maybe the complete opposite being the case. So I'm putting that on pause. We'll get back as soon as the news breaks. As soon as we find out, that'll be the next video I do. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking for AFC North offenses, we will get to that. But today we begin defenses, and we are starting with the NFC East. A division that got a ton of conversation when we talked about the offenses. I was very surprised. I did not expect to get the conversation that I got, the amount of views that I got with that one. So I'm looking forward to starting off the defensive side of the ball with the NFC East defenses. So as always, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear from you all, diving in and all that good stuff. But like I said, NFC East defenses, we are going from 4 to 1, and I already know that I'm going to make some people really upset with this division because based off of just what I saw from the last time we talked NFC East, and there's just no pleasing everybody. But at number 4, I'm sorry, Cowboys fans, but I have you at the bottom of the totem pole here, and a lot of it has to do with some moves that were made this offseason that I'm not particularly a fan of, coupled with the fact that you have players coming off of injuries that you have no guarantee they are going to be who they were prior to their injuries, or maybe just more so how long it takes them to get back to who they were prior to their injuries. That is something that is kind of weighing on me with the Cowboys right now. And for what it's worth, the defense was not perfect last season already as it is. And if these moves that, again, I'm not a big fan of come to fruition the way I'm kind of anticipating, plus you have guys working off of injuries trying to get back to form, and maybe it takes them a little bit longer than you'd like, I just have some concerns there. That all being said, you look at the injury front that I've kind of mentioned here and alluded to, of course, Trayvon Diggs missing a vast majority, or it was, if not all of last season. I forget exactly when he got hurt, but it was a large majority of the season, if not nearly the whole thing. Deron Bland missed a significant amount of time. Micah Parsons missed a handful of games. I'm not really worried about him, but just things of note as far as injuries and what really affected this defense last year and putting them in the position they were. DeMarvion Overshown missed a chunk of last season as well. DeMarcus Lawrence obviously only played in 4 games. He's not even on the team anymore. But there is just a long list of guys that missed a ton of time last year that ultimately led to the defense struggling quite a bit. Not to mention the injury to Dak Prescott that also made the offense really inefficient. And that obviously affects how the defense plays as well when the offense is maybe struggling to move the football, putting the defense back on the field sooner than you'd rather like, gassing them out. Like, there's a whole list of things that you could rattle off about why the Cowboys defense was in the state that it was last year. Now, to double down on my concerns, though, like I said, I am uncertain about some of the free agent acquisitions, and here's why. Dante Fowler's brought back to the Cowboys after taking a season into, Washington, I think he was in last year? Yes, it was in Washington. So he comes in off of a 10.5 sack season. He's kind of been like a hired mercenary for sacks, basically, for the duration of his career, just kind of stopping here and there in places. He racks up, anywhere from 4 to 6, 7, 8 sacks, maybe has a good 10-sack season, double-digit number here or there. But the last time he was in Dallas, did not really have a ton of success in the scheme. He only had 4 sacks in a season and 6 sacks in another, so not really a ton of success. I mean, fine, so be it. But if this is someone who's potentially in line to see a significant amount of snaps as a guy like Donovan Ezeraku, who you drafted in this year's draft class, comes along, I'm just not super high on it, I guess. And then on top of that, you look at a guy like Kaiir Elam, who could potentially be poised to see a significant amount of snap time, depending on how everyone's working through some of the injury issues we've seen in the secondary of the Dallas Cowboys, and just depending on, how the season shakes itself out. If Kaiir Elam is a guy that you are relying on to be one of your lead corners, I'm not a fan. And if you wonder why, you can go ahead and ask any Buffalo Bills fan why I would say something like that. I do like that they retooled the depth of the defensive line and some of the work that they've done in the defensive front, though. I don't want to sit here and act like everything was not good about the Dallas Cowboys this offseason. That is far from the truth. I do like the fact that they went and deepened the interior. Going after Solomon Thomas during free agency, I think, is a really good thing there. Peyton Turner is obviously his depth piece, if anything, maybe surprises you and gets a little bit more going there, but I do like the work that they did there. As I previously mentioned, Donovan Ezeraku, a guy that I really liked coming into this year's draft. I have a lot of really high hopes for him. And I will say this, maybe it takes him a little time to come along. There's a lot of people that seem to have some concern as far as his power and ability in the NFL at the next level, but I do think that this is someone, when you think about his character and just the ability that he did show on the football field, Donovan Ezeraku is a guy that if he went into a situation where he doesn't have to be the guy, and he doesn't because Micah Parsons is there, I think that's probably the best case scenario he could have landed in. So I love that he's in Dallas, and I think that's going to be huge for them. Kenneth Murray should be an upgrade over some of the other guys you had working the middle of the football field as far as linebackers are concerned. Jack Sanborn's a guy that I'm intrigued by, good run defender, kind of a liability in pass coverage though. So there are things that I like. I don't want to sit here and act like I don't like anything. I just have a ton of concerns. And you know what? There's a good chance I could be completely wrong about this. I'm more than happy in sitting here and admitting that. But as it currently stands right now, I can't be sold on it. I can't be sold on it. So I'm sorry, Cowboys fans. Moving into the number 3 spot, and I should note here, if you didn't see it, I did put out a poll, and I would love for you all to go back to that poll and make a vote if you haven't already. I did put out a poll yesterday about who you think is the best defense in the NFC East going into 2025, and this team, the Washington Commanders, was a very, very close second place. It was basically runaway Philadelphia Eagles, and then the other 3 teams were tight. The last I looked, Washington was in the lead by 8% for the number 2 spot here, but I have them at number 3. And this is more so about me really not liking some of the additions that they made this offseason. And I really liked the direction that Washington obviously flipped with last year, looking for a veteran presence to go along with what was a young group of guys. And my biggest gripe is that you're going out and you're bringing in a guy like Jonathan Jones, wrong side of 30, Dietrich Wise, wrong side of 30, 2 guys that were let go by the New England Patriots for one reason or another, but wrong side of 30, and guys that could potentially be considered legit starters on this defense here, depending on how things shake out, and are probably going to see a significant amount of playing time. Just does not sit right with me. I'm not a super big fan of that. I'm intrigued in how Will Harris will do in the back end of the defense. And then, of course, you have Marshawn Lattimore, who only wound up playing 5 total games for you last season. It took him forever to come back to the team after being traded at the deadline. And then there was just that really long absence. He played in a couple of games, then missed a couple more before the playoffs hit. And then he obviously played in the 3 playoff games. But it's just one of those things where I am not sold on how they tried to make this defense, I guess, better. And on top of that, you look at just where the defense was last year, it wasn't necessarily great. Now, they did some work on the interior of the D-line. You could point to that. Maybe Javon Kinlaw is a boost over letting, I believe it was Jonathan Allen that they let walk this offseason. So there is that. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say everything's negative. There are some things I do like, or I'm just looking forward to seeing. You have Mike Sanristril, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'll be lying to you if I said I did. But he was strong last season as a second-round selection, and he ended up looking really good for the secondary. So, there are positives and things that I'm looking forward to seeing play out this year. But just too many question marks for me to really feel comfortable about putting them any higher. There's a good chance that maybe this offense produces even further and helps out the defense even more, and some of the concerns I have get masked a little bit here, but I would look at Washington as kind of a bit of an imperfect defense last year and somewhat of a piece as to why the team finished the season the way they did. And listen, you play the Philadelphia Eagles, who basically stomped everyone en route to a Super Bowl victory. Not really something that you're going to sit here and hold against them, but just something worth thinking about. So I settled on Washington at number 3. Could be wrong, but I like them there as far as how we stand right now. Moving into the number 2 spot, a defense that I don't think gets quite the credit it deserves after last season, just with an offense that was basically trying to shoot them in the foot in each and every single opportunity it had, to put it lightly. The New York Football Giants coming in at the number 2 spot. I don't think that this defense gets enough credit considering where the offense struggled so mightily. And I think you could say the same thing for the Dallas Cowboys, as I talked about them earlier. When you want to talk about an offense that's trying to hurt you, the Giants offense sitting on 23 total turnovers last year, tied them for 10th most in the NFL. This is one of those groups that, despite all of that, still performed at a pretty high level. You look at the number of sacks they finished with last year at 45, which was second most in the division. They also were tied for third in the NFL with 96 total tackles for loss. They were pretty efficient overall. They just lacked the ability to turn the football over. And again, an offense that was just really not helping them out. They had the highest snap count on defense of any team within this division, but yet again, still not the worst defense in the division last season, despite the amount of time they spent on the football field, despite the amount of times the offense put them in bad places. I'm actually really excited to see what this unit can do here. It starts, of course, with the drafting of Abdul Carter and what he could potentially bring to this defense. You're now running Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau in what should be a ferocious 3-man pass rush, depending on the situation and who's on the football field. I think you're going to get production, despite what was a bit of an interesting situation with the drafting of Abdul Carter. And again, obviously having Kayvon Thibodeau, and I guess some people being a little bit uncertain as to how the Giants actually feel about him. He's had a couple of good seasons sandwiched between a not so great season, but I do think when Kayvon Thibodeau is healthy, he's an effective guy coming off the edge. And now you have this trio of pass rushers, similar to like when Azeez Ojulari was still here and it was Kayvon, Azeez, and Brian Burns. You now basically replace that with a better option now in Abdul Carter. So I think coming off the edge, really excited to see what they're going to be able to do as a trio there, rotating out depending on the situations. Like I mentioned, you look at the defensive line, and or more so the interior, I guess you should say, and this is a group that was already really good, led by Dexter Lawrence II, but then you go in free agency, you shore things up depth-wise, but also in the draft, you get what was like everyone's interior defensive line darling in Darius Alexander out of Toledo in the 3rd round. This is a group that was already a strong suit for this defense, only getting stronger and deeper. You look at like a Chauncey Golston addition as well, a guy who saw some decent success in Dallas, and I think it is, again, great depth piece. He doesn't have to be a guy on this defense, but a great rotational piece for you. I really like what they have brewing over there on the defensive front side of things in New York. Then you look at the secondary, a group that definitely needed to see some improvements this offseason. You go out and you sign Javon Holland from Miami. You get Paulson Adebo from New Orleans. Depending on how you feel about Paulson Adebo, you're probably more excited or than others, but this is one of those things where, despite how you may or may not feel about him, I think he is at least an upgrade at the very minimum for this secondary in New York, coupled with Javon Holland, who I think is a very good safety to have in the backfield of this defense. You have a handful of young guys that have been slowly growing and working their way through, and guys like Tyler Nubin. You have Deonte Banks, you have Drew Phillips, Cordell Flott. Like, there's a ton of really good younger talent that I think needed to have a little bit more of a veteran presence and some older guys to help lead the pack. And this is, I think, some really good additions for the defense overall. The Giants are poised to be in a much better situation, not only defensively, but offensively, and I think that's also going to help the defense here as well. There's obviously some uncertainty as to what you get out of Russell Wilson and potentially how soon a guy like Jackson Dart has to find himself into the fold here, but I don't really think the offense can be any worse than it was last year, and I do think in part that's going to really help out the defense, because like I said, and you could say the same thing for the Dallas Cowboys last year, both those defenses, Giants of course as we're talking here, did not get any help at all from their offenses in putting them in bad situations. Again, 23 offensive turnovers for the New York Giants last year, putting the defenses in bad spots. Despite that, still effective in the red zone, still a pretty good 3rd down defense. Like, we're still a pretty solid unit overall and one of the more effective in the NFL, never mind just in the division. So I like where they are going right now. If they can pick up the ability to turn over the football a little bit more as well. They sat last year as far as interceptions go with only 5. Like, there's basically nowhere to really go but further up with the way this team has been put together this offseason, and I think the Giants are going to surprise a lot of people here. So if you're sitting here listening to me going, I cannot believe he thinks the Giants are the second best defense going into this season, that was the goal here. I think it's going to be a unit that's going to surprise a lot of people, and it even kind of surprised myself coming into this rankings here when I finally settled on them at number 2. And then, of course, to wrap things up, who else but the Philadelphia Eagles at the number 1 spot here? I don't really think this surprised too many people. This is an entire team that is basically running it back off the championship team they had last year with a few changes here or there. I think one of the biggest question marks for the Philadelphia Eagles going into this next season is just how the pass rush is going to fare, and just the defensive line as a whole is going to fare after losing guys like Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. I don't think you can ignore that, and there is going to be a big microscope on the defensive front and how they're going to handle certain situations here. You look at Jalix Hunt, a guy who's probably going to see a significant increase in snaps, and then along the defensive line, Nolan Smith Jr., obviously, as far as getting after the quarterback goes, you're going to see more work from him. You're going to see more work for guys like Moro Ojomo. Like, there's a lot to look at as far as the guys along the defensive line having to pick up some of the slack after watching a couple of those guys depart from this defense here. You still have, of course, though, some big men in the middle, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. Like, I have no real concerns. It's more so just how productive are they going to be. And this is a defense that, despite taking a pretty big step back from how productive the defensive front was the year prior last season, they were still really effective. Didn't notch up as nearly as many sacks, but they were still a really good unit altogether. And then you look at, like, the backside of the defense here. Ton of turnover. You see guys like Darius Slay Jr. being allowed to walk, but that's largely in part because you, of course, have guys who have stepped up like Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell, who coming out of last year's drafts in rounds 1 and 2, stepped up, stepped into their role, and performed, especially towards the later half of the season, unbelievably. Like, literal top-tier starters at their position levels. You look at what Cooper DeJean's doing as a nickelback, finished off the season, capping it off in the best way possible with a pick 6 in the Super Bowl, basically encapsulating what was a strong just ascension going through the year. Quinion Mitchell basically shot out of a cannon and just kept getting better and better and better week after week. It was very quickly he went from rookie to basically looking like a veteran himself very early in his rookie season. I don't have any real reason to doubt the team. And then you look at how they filled out the depth chart here. Like, the fact that your first and second round picks don't necessarily need to be starters day one because of how deep this unit is incredible, to say the very least. Jihad Campbell, I know that there's injury concerns regarding the shoulder and the knee injuries of his past, but if he comes in and he's fine, like, that's an unbelievable steal for this Philadelphia Eagles defense to come away with. Andrew Makuba to round out some of the depth in the safety room. Like, you don't necessarily need him to start day one. He could very well steal that starting spot, but you don't necessarily need him to. And then you go to, like, some of the free agent signings. Bring Josh Uche, I'm not super thrilled about. I don't really think he's going to move the needle too much for them, but a solid depth piece, I would say, more or less. You have Azeez Ojulari, who was really effective in his opportunities for the New York Giants. You have Adoree Jackson, who, again, nice depth piece, does not really have to do too much for you because you have such a young and up-and-coming secondary of guys that are either athletic freaks or already proved themselves in really big spots last year. I don't really know how you look at this defense and think that it's not going to be the best in the division going into the 2025 season. Yeah, you could say it's a new year. Last year doesn't matter. Absolutely. I totally agree. But there is something to say about precedents already being set for these guys, and unless all of a sudden Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean are going to forget how to play football after really strong rookie campaigns, and some of the guys like Zach Bond, Nolan Smith Jr., Jalen Carter, and Jordan Davis are going to suddenly go from being legitimate starters on a vast majority of any NFL team that they go on, if not all of them, to, we don't know how to play football anymore. Yeah, you may be concerned about a loss or two on the defensive front in guys like Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, but I'm not really too worried about the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is one of those things where it's like they have a step above the rest of the division in my eyes. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's not close, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it's extremely far apart, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's that close either. Like, I think there is a sizable enough gap to mention between the Eagles and the rest of the division defensively. They are just on another level right now when it comes to drafting and free agent pickups that they're making right now. I have no doubt in my mind that this defense is going to run the division for at least another season here going into 2025. Things are shaping up extremely well for this team, both offensively and defensively, and it's a clean sweep for them at number one. They took the number one spot offensively and defensively for me, at the very least, in these rankings here. So let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? How would you rank these teams? Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you think I'm a moron? Fire away. I would love to hear from you all. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.